Good morning, everybody. It's Nissa, the hypnobirthing midwife. Welcome. We have a wonderful guest today. I'm incredibly excited about our guest. I won't say too much because I'm going to get her to introduce herself. I've got a grumbly baby here. But I will say I have her book here. And this book has made me feel very excited about weaning, which is what we're about to start in about 2 weeks. So that's what I'm going to say. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thank you for the intro. Yeah, I'm Rachel. I am also known as Little Veggie Eats on Instagram. And as Nisa kindly said, I've got a book on vegetarian and vegan weaning, which was published earlier this year. So what I was going to do today is a quick sort of run through of the basics of weaning and maybe talk about some specific issues if you decide to if you want to do vegetarian or vegan weaning. It's just going to be sort of an overview. I should also just highlight as well that I'm not a nutritionist. I worked with a lovely nutritionist on my book who's also a local mum, Jodie Abrahams. So then any nutritional information I'm going to give today has sort of come via her, which also means if you've got specific nutritional questions, I might not be able to answer them unless they're sort of basically in the book. I didn't know whether it was worth sort of giving you an opportunity to sort of intro yourself and sort of say where you are at and if you're sort of weaning or about to start, or if you've got anything you'd like me to cover. I don't know what you normally do on these talks.
Thanks, Rachel. I think what we'll do is it'd be wonderful to hear from you, whatever you want to share, as little or as much. And then normally we have a Q&A at the end, if that's okay.
That's fine.
I'm very mindful of time because I know you're a busy lady, so we'll make sure that we stick, your time is precious to us, but it's so nice to have a bit of a Q&A, and then you can always ask. You can see some of the babies, and then we've got some pregnant ladies as well.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay, so I suppose I'll just start with, sort of, are you ready to wean? So like the three sort of normal signs of sort of readiness for babies are being able to sit up and hold their head steady. So they might not be able to sit unaided by themselves, but they're sort of quite sort of strong. If they're sat in a high chair, they're not sort of flopping about too much. Bring food to their mouth. So you might see if they've been playing with toys, they can grab and put it into their mouth. That could be a sign. And then the other one is they're able to sort of basically move food around their mouth and swallow it rather than just sort of spit it back out. Although at the start of weaning, it's really common for them to spit it back out anyway because it's all brand new. So now I think the guidance is generally waiting until 6 months, and there's quite a sort of few reasons for that. Sort of breast milk and formula up to 6 months provides enough nutrition for your baby. It also, developmentally, they might not be able to feed themselves, and their stomachs might not be quite as ready. Of course, there are different guidelines, and some people do choose to wean earlier, and that is obviously, it's a personal choice. I'm just sort of talking about what the NHS recommends. At 6 months, though, your baby's iron stores start to deplete. So breast milk doesn't contain enough iron or formula to keep them going. So you want to be sort of introducing solids, which especially are iron rich, because they need that iron in their diet. So you might have heard a phrase around food before one is just fun. It's not technically correct, and although it is a time when they don't need to eat great amounts of food, it is an important time to sort of lay down sort of like different nutritional habits and introduce them to food, but they do also need a little bit from the food as well. Also, waiting until 6 months, you'll find that your baby, because they can sit up and do all that, they're more likely to be able to feed themselves, and it's a great thing for their sort of motor skills and stuff for them to have finger food with each meal, even if you're sort of spoon feeding and stuff. So there's a lot of things going on in weaning. It's not just about food, it's about introducing them to food and the concept of family meal times, getting them comfortable and relaxed around food, and also these developmental skills of bringing food to their mouth and holding things and exploring, and that might include also making a massive mess, but that's all good too. So the key things that you would avoid around weaning are salt. Babies only need the tiniest amount of salt, so try not to add it to any food. That includes if you buy like cans of beans and lentils, choose one that are just in plain water and not salted water. This is because you'll find salt is in things like bread, which you would give to your baby, so you don't want to add it to anything else. You should also avoid sugar, just because they don't really need sugar at this age, and it's bad for their teeth, which might just be starting to come through. If any of you are going through teething at the moment, you have my sympathies. It is horrendous. And also, so honey as well, it contains something called infant botulism, so that can cause reactions, so they recommend waiting until 12 months to have honey. And then also I would avoid, before sort of their 12 months, any sort of over-processed convenience food, and this is often because it contains lots of salt. And I think specific as well on sort of if you're vegetarian or plant-based, I get a lot of questions about, can you introduce corn before sort of 12 months and stuff? I would say that's very much a personal preference, but actually corn and food like that, which can be quite high in fibre, so you might find it's quite challenging for younger children to digest. So I personally waited until my children were sort of over 12 months, and then that sort of, they are higher in salt than sort of normal food you give them. So again, that sort of just waiting makes it sort of a bit easier from salt and digestion. So in terms of weaning, you've probably heard the two main sort of types, which is sort of baby-led weaning and spoon-fed weaning. Neither is, like, if you do one or the other, neither is better than the other, really. I think there's evidence to suggest that neither creates a difference in fussiness later down the line. And it's very much a personal choice, I would have thought. So traditional baby-led weaning is you don't feed the baby anything. So we let them sort of pick everything up, and sort of everything is a finger food, you know, softer food you'd serve on loaded spoons, so with dips. And then spoon-fed is obviously, is what it says, you're spoon feeding them. And even if you're doing spoon feeding, you would want to introduce finger foods at every meal anyway. In reality, most people do sort of a combination of them both. I sort of left it with each of my 3 children, let them kind of guide me and what they like. My eldest was very much, didn't want me to feed anything to him, and that was fine. We did more baby-led weaning. My next 2 children both sort of, I mean, one of them will throw a spoon at me, like, feed me, I need this food in me now. So I think you can just sort of take an approach where you follow your baby's cues. And again, as weaning is about introducing food as a family as well, you might find that one or the other works better for you as a family in terms of sort of your meal times and the way you're cooking and your own approaches. So I think taking this sort of relaxed approach will probably make it easier for all of you. I'm going to sort of talk quickly about the nutrients, especially on a vegetarian and vegan diet. So apologies if anyone isn't vegetarian or vegan. These will still relate as well, but obviously not as, probably wouldn't pay as much attention to them. So first of all, is it okay to wean on a veggie or vegan diet? Yes, absolutely. The best thing you can do is aim for a really varied diet, and that's the best way to ensure your baby gets all the nutrients it can from the food. And I think that would apply even if you were weaning with animal products too. If you are choosing to do a totally plant-based or vegan diet, it is a little bit more complicated and might need a bit more planning. And I would recommend you speak with a nutritionist or dietitian, because it could be that either you, if you're breastfeeding, or your baby might need supplements. And that's very much a sort of personal thing, depending on sort of your own diet and lifestyle. So when you're weaning your baby, generally, your sort of ideal plate of food is very much similar to our ideal plate of food, which is you're looking about providing carbohydrates, protein and fats. And fat's really important for a baby, so we always would choose things with full fat in them. So if you are doing dairy, full fat dairy, for instance, and if you're choosing plant-based alternatives, again, looking at this nice high fat content. So as I already mentioned, iron is one of the most important things we think about weaning, because that's your baby's iron stores are depleting. So it's also the one lots of people would commonly go, but where do you get that from if you don't eat meat? Because obviously red meat is very rich in iron. So there's lots of foods which are rich in iron that are vegetarian. So dark leafy greens, lots of pulses and legumes. So peas, beans, lentils, and that includes obviously tofu, because that is from the soybean. Whole grains, so brown pasta, brown rice, brown bread. Nuts and seeds, again, nuts and seeds, obviously you want to check for allergies first. I'm going to touch on allergies in a minute. And for a baby as well, nuts and seeds you'd always either blitz to a powder or use as a nut butter. Eggs are a good source of iron, and dried fruit. But again, when your baby's quite small, dried fruit is quite sugary, so it's something you'd probably have in moderation. And then the best way when you're serving iron-rich foods, if you serve them alongside a vitamin C-rich food, it helps boost the absorption of the iron, which again, on a vegetarian or vegan diet, is pretty important. And that is as little as just squeezing over a fresh squirt of lemon or lime juice to your meal will help boost it. Vitamin C breaks down with heat, so the fresher it is, the better. So like fresh tomato, for instance. Again, the one that I always get asked about on a vegetarian vegan diet is how do you get your protein? And if you're already vegetarian or vegan, you know, well, there's lots of different sources of protein and it's in lots of different food. The difference is, I suppose, lots of the animal-based proteins, including dairy and eggs, are what you would call complete proteins, which means they contain all the 9 amino acids your body needs, whereas a lot of the plant-based sources ones are incomplete, but you make them complete by just combining them. So for instance, if you had some hummus that has got chickpeas and tahini in it, and you've made that a complete protein, and the same, for instance, if you had like a dal and you served it with some sort of like sprinkled seeds on top. So it's basically this emphasis on variety helps your sort of body get all these complete proteins. So sources of there are some complete vegetarian sources of protein. So things like pseudo cereals, like buckwheat and quinoa are complete ones, as is tofu and soybeans. So edamame beans are great. They're not a great texture for small babies, but blend them up and you can have them as a dip and that would be perfect. And then some incomplete ones are obviously like things like lentils, black beans and chickpeas, different nuts and seeds, and things like that. So again, it's just sort of variety. And then I've touched on it a bit about the vitamin C already. So you would get sort of, if you're having vitamin C, that's an important one to continue, and that's in lots of fresh fruit and vegetables as well. B12 is another one that you might have heard about if you're vegetarian or vegan. You get that in dairy and eggs and generally sort of animal products. So if you are vegan, you might want to consider a supplement either for you or thinking about it for your child, but also fortified cereals and plant milks. So that's why you don't give your baby between 6 and 12 months sort of alternative milks to drink, because they can only have breast milk or formula at this stage, but you can cook with them or add it to foods, or you can add your yogurt. And again, it's just a matter of having a look through. It's a bit sort of annoying. They're all different nutritional content. So you're just looking at the labels and working out which ones are fortified. Generally, it means anything that's organic won't be fortified. So if you then go for something that's not organic, you might want to sort of, if you normally have organic stuff and you don't feel comfortable having non-organic, you might need to sort of do a bit of research into different sort of providers and see which one works best for you. Zinc is another one on vegetarian vegan diet which you can get, and that's in egg yolks, sunflower and pumpkin seeds, and different whole grains and beans. So as you can see, it's loads of the same food just coming back up again. So there's emphasis on lots of, like, I'd say whole grains, beans and pulses, and nuts and seeds in this nice varied diet. And finally, the last one is iodine. Again, dairy is the best vegetarian source. So if you're dairy free, again, have a look and see what's fortified with iodine. That might help, and it might be if you're breastfeeding, you might need an iodine supplement. But most of all, even though I've just gone through all that nutritional stuff, as I'm going to say about for the millionth time, it's all about variety. So try and relax, and just as long as you're sort of mixing up what you're feeding your baby, and remember they're not necessarily going to eat loads of everything, they might just have a tiny taste, but you're getting them used to this idea of eating this variety of food. So I'll go back to the beginning now and getting started, and practically, like, how are you going to introduce solid food to your baby? So again, this is quite a sort of personal thing, and there are lots of different ways you can sort of go with weaning. I personally went for this sort of doing a week of vegetables and just first taste that way. And if you can start with like less sweet vegetables, apparently that makes them your baby more welcoming of a wider variety of vegetables as they get older. I'm not sure that's current research, but I'm not sure how like far reaching that is. So it could be in 5 years time they're like, well, actually that doesn't make a difference either, but who knows. But that's what I'm doing at the moment, and I think a lot of people advise it. So you would start probably with, you know, one meal a day at a time when your baby isn't too hungry or too tired. So it could be sort of an hour after they wake up or an hour after they've eaten. Just try and go with something that seems enjoyable for both of you and sort of a relaxing thing. So it could I often started at lunchtime. It also gives you enough time in the day to monitor if your baby's had a reaction to something. So once your baby is 6 months old, before 6 months, I'd probably advise only doing sort of fruit and vegetables, and then after their 6 months, their stomachs are more developed, and you can start introducing a wider range of sort of beans, pulses, and starchier foods, and also potential allergens. So I think a lot of people are quite worried about introducing allergens to your baby, especially, obviously, you all know about peanut allergies. I know with my first, I did it at a time when my husband was home, so we could run to the hospital if he had this like hideous reaction and stuff. But I mean, obviously it was fine, but there are children who do have these reactions. So, it's more about being vigilant, and I would introduce each allergen a few days apart so you can sort of see if there's a reaction. And your main allergenic foods are dairy, eggs, gluten, nuts and seeds. And for nuts and seeds, it's important to note that you can have an allergy just to one, so you would offer each one separately to see if there's a reaction. Not doing what I did for my second, which was gave her like a piece of like seeded toast which had about 5 different seeds in it, so she'd have had a reaction, would have to avoid all of those seeds awaiting an allergy test. So that's what not to do. Soya as well, and if you eat it, shellfish and fish. So it's just about offering a small amount of this, and then just monitoring for reaction, and that can be ranging from a sort of serious reaction, they're struggling to breathe, going red, to it could just be their sort of wheezing or sneezing, sort of like itchiness. If you go on the NHS website, it's got sort of lots of allergen advice of how you would monitor that. And again, if you've got a family history of allergies, especially strong allergies, it might be worth talking to your doctor before introducing potential allergens. I think the research now suggests that delaying introducing things like eggs and nuts can lead to more allergens. So it's not something you should put off doing. So sort of around 6 months, it's good to just start doing it. But again, as you're sort of feeling comfortable and feeling relaxed. So for me, practically how I weaned is I found it easier to sort of do one meal for all the family, especially once I'd done what I call this sort of first week of first taste. So it's more about sort of changing your habits of the way you cook, it could be. So for me, that meant I would sort of season our food at the end. So rather than, I didn't add salt to it and make anything too spicy, or I'd have a tiny little pan on the go and scoop off something that I was cooking for the baby. Thinking about how you chop your vegetables for your baby. So when they're young weaners, they probably want to pick up a baton sort of so they can grip it in their fist. So you want it to be a bit bigger than their fist because they don't have that sort of grip. So you can just chop them like that. And then as they get older, between 8 and 12 months, quite a big range, they'll develop their pincer grasp, which means they start picking things up like this. So then once they get to that age, you might start dicing your vegetables a bit smaller so that they can practice that skill. And you'll notice it anyway as you're feeding them, they suddenly sort of go from this grabbing to really, really wanting these little bits. So you said that's when like peas and sweet corn become really popular, and like beans and stuff. And if you're doing things like baby-led weaning, you don't have to, it's not just all about finger food, it's more about adapting the way you serve things. So if you want to serve something like a soup or a dip, just serve it alongside either some steamed veg or some toast or bread that they can just dip into it, and let them have this full sort of sensory experience. You can also give them loaded spoons, which they can sort of grab and practice trying to put in their mouth. They'll sort of get covered in it, but that's fine. Just make sure you've got some good flannels on hand and maybe like one of those full bib overalls. And also, so if you're spoon feeding as well, always think about if you've decided to puree your food, especially veg, maybe try and keep some whole bits so that they can explore picking them up as well and practice those skills. I suppose most of it though is overall, try not to stress about weaning, and remember that all babies take different times to get used to food. Some of them will just get straight into it and seem to take to it immediately. Other ones will just take their time, and it might be you feel like you're just still constantly feeding them and they're not taking in any food. But what they are doing is they're getting exposed to it, they're practicing these skills, and at some point it will sort of click. So it's not something, I don't think you can't really compare your baby to another baby, because it's just brand new skill that you're both getting used to. And it's just, it's not about how much they eat, and they advise that there isn't really a portion size for babies, because one day they could potentially eat loads, other days they might not eat anything, or they're just dipping their tongue and having a taste. But what you're doing at this time is setting them up for sort of a lifetime good relationship with food, getting them used to eating this varied and balanced diet, and feeling sort of relaxed and confident at the mealtime, and sort of putting in place yourself these family meal times. So even if you're not eating at the same time as your baby, perhaps sitting down with them at the table so that they sort of know that this is eating time and it's nice and relaxing. So that's all I'd sort of got to say. I appreciate I went really quickly. But has anyone got any sort of specific questions, and we can sort of look at them now?
Wow, that was amazing, Rachel.
I just realised it was really fast.
No, it was amazing. I'll have to listen again, definitely, maybe twice, just because I had this little guy going. Thank you. That was really like comprehensive to start with. And before I fire away with my questions, I will just put it out to everyone else. Ladies, if you'd like to ask anything, please go ahead.
Yeah, and feel free to just put it in the chat bar if you don't want to sort of put your sound on or anything.
Hi, I've got a question about iron, actually. You mentioned that, which is really useful. Basically, I grew up vegetarian, but then have been told over the years I'm really anemic, and to have the talk of heme iron and non-heme iron, and I've gone through patches of eating meat to try and get my iron up, and then going back to being vegetarian and all that kind of thing. And so that's something I'm not really clear on what to do with my child, because she's only 3 months, so not there yet, but just sort of not really sure about. Yeah, it's just interesting to hear what you'd recommend, really, with sort of the iron in sort of, you mentioned amino acids, which is really helpful. And
yeah, so I mean, so that's why I mentioned the vitamin C alongside iron, because it helps the body absorb these plant-based sources of iron. But obviously the animal-based sources of iron are better, and they're more sort of readily absorbed by the body. So I guess it's, I mean, I feel like iron and iron deficiency is very much a personal thing to a person. So I don't think it's necessarily, you might find even if you ate meat, it's the same. Like, so for me personally, I've been vegetarian all my life and have never, other than in pregnancy. So I think it's really difficult to sort of say how it will work and whether that's been passed down to your child.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're concerned, I would probably recommend speaking with a doctor or a specialist and seeing what they say and whether they think you should supplement or start off with meat in the diet, because it is slightly easier for the body to absorb, like, more readily. Otherwise, it would be this focus on iron-rich food and serving alongside vitamin C.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Sorry, that's not very helpful.
No. It's you're right. It's completely personal, and so it's very important to remember that. But yeah, thank you. It's been really helpful to hear you talk.
Okay, Mrs. got a question. What are your tips for making it as fun as possible? I think that's all just about being sort of relaxed, taking the stress away. There will be days, and especially, you know, if your baby's teething or really tired, that they do not want to sit at the table and they are not having fun. And if that's happening, it doesn't matter. Just shut the meal time down and sort of move away from it and accept that that's the day. I would say tips for making it fun, though, is lots of different brightly coloured food, and I think that's really easy with different sort of vegetables. So I would do lots of, like, I use spinach and beetroot to colour things bright pink or bright green, so you can have like different dips and things like that. And I think that just adds to this sensory experience, because they're like, ooh, bright, and dip their things in. And again, I think having a range of different textures, so that it's not just about food, it's about squishing their hands into dips, grabbing things and stuff. And I think that makes it all really fun for a baby, because actually, so, you know, whilst they're a baby, they're not going to be interested so much in, you know, things and faces and food looking fun. It is very much this, like, what looks nice to grab, what do I want to, like, smash on my face or something like that. So I think, yeah, sort of going quite basic like that. What are my favourite recipes from the book? Well, the one that I feel like I cook myself loads is the pea risotto, just because it's like the quickest meal ever. So we eat that all the time. And I'm trying to remember what else. And probably lollies, just because my kids are lolly obsessed. So yeah, we always have a lot of lollies. So I feel like during the summer I have like 3 different molds, and some days filling them all, and they're all having like 3 lollies each in the day and stuff. A non-sweet veg is pretty much every veg other than, I would say, sweet potato, pumpkin and carrots. So it's courgette, mushrooms, broccoli, cauliflower, pretty much everything, like any other sort of like spinach and greens. Yeah, so I mean, you've definitely got like a week's worth of taste just with them. Like broccoli is a great one to start with, because it's really easy for your baby to hold it if you're doing finger food. And all I did was, in that very first week, that did non-sweet veg, and then after 1 week then introduced like carrots and the pumpkin and the sweet potato. So it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say like it's something to be too stressed about. Like if it happens that they have carrot in the first week, it's not a problem really. Yes, you can do that. I actually did give my baby big piece of leaf to suck on, but I've since heard that that is perhaps a choking risk, but I was monitoring her. Yeah, you could blitz them to a fine thing and then serve them, as I said, if you're baby-led weaning, with a loaded spoon or just spoon-fed for them. I think the texture of greens anyway is quite challenging for a baby, so a lot of the green food I introduce to children who are below 6 months anyway is probably more blitzed up. So in sort of something as you're a bit older, past this first taste, in things like pancakes or like blended into scrambled egg and tofu and things like that, just because, or in a pesto, just because I think it's that if you don't have teeth or anything, it's very challenging to sort of finely chopped greens and not the easiest thing to eat.
Haha, I have a non-grumbly baby for 1 minute, so I'm going to jump in with my question. It's a bit of a specific one, Rachel. We eat a lot of tofu. We love it, plant-based. Any recommendations on brands or any brands that you use at home at all?
I use the extra firm, is it Tofu? T-O-F-O-O. And that's the one I've like, I think before that I was like struggling with one, and that's my favorite one. And I always buy it, and I sort of recommend to people as well, if they can, buying an organic tofu as well. I just think feels sort of better. So yeah, that's my favorite one. Yeah, in fact, since I had that, I feel like I said to someone the other day, like that changed my whole like attitude towards tofu, was that brand.
Oh, I bloomin' love tofu. We eat probably too much of it, but never mind. Anyone else? Feel free. Sorry, say that again, right?
Very good for you. It's a complete protein.
Oh, delicious.
Lots of iron.
Super yummy. Let me see. Anybody else before I jump in again?
Notes, and I hope I wrote down correctly. You were saying it's best to offer this food to the baby before they're showing like hunger signs, and you said 1 hour after they woke up or 2 hours?
Oh, so I mean, it's either depending on how your sort of baby's routine is, sort of an hour after they've woken up or an hour after they've had a feed, so they're not sort of too hungry or too tired, basically. Because I think when they're very young, at 6 months, they're not going to take enough from the food that you're sort of like introducing to sort of satisfy their hunger. So they're just going to get hungrier and crosser and frustrated. So it depends. So some babies feed as soon as they wake up, and then there'll be an hour after that. Other babies feed to sleep, so it'll be sort of, I suppose, smack bang in the middle of that awake time that they have in the middle of the day.
Thank you.
So it's kind of thinking about it as something fun to do rather than thinking I've got to get loads of food.
Yeah, I think especially in those first few weeks, they're not eating enough, especially things like if you think about vegetables and the calorie content of a vegetable compared to the calorie content of breast milk or formula, that's not going to satiate their hunger or fill them up. So it's more about sort of getting them into the idea of feeding. So you're not using it as a way to fill them up. It's literally just introducing them to sort of tastes and textures. Later down the line, when they're eating sort of a wider range of food, then they'll start being full up from the food, and you might see that they start dropping milk feeds and stuff, but it's quite unlikely for that to happen in the first few weeks.
I'm not sure. I think from the book, Rachel, that maybe your kids have dairy milk, and I just wondered any recommendations about, so after that first year we don't have dairy at home, so I haven't actually done any reading or looking, and I probably will, I should, about then follow-on milk. So of course he's having breast milk now, he'll probably have milk till who knows, but for quite a while, but then adding a complementary milk in. So
actually both my two younger ones have they have oat milk. rather than it's only my eldest who has cow's milk because he refuses to have anything else. But yeah, so they, so you can look at different brands. I feel like I overloaded on looking at oat milks because Oatly came out and they'd had this investment and everyone was like, oh, we can't buy Oatly. So mine have Oatly Barista milk, which has got quite high fat content and it's also fortified. I did quite a lot of research on different brands that have the same level of fortification. So Marks and Spencer's own, and I think Asda own and Aldi own also fortify to similar levels, so they would be good alternatives. I think as well, if you follow SR Nutrition on Instagram, she did a really helpful blog post about plant-based milks and stuff and did a comparison with all the different nutritional values, and she rated, I think it was an Outpro, no added sugar, soy highly, Mighty P and Oatly Barista as sort of the top 3 that are good for this sort of post 12 months milk.
That's amazing. That's so helpful. You probably saved me hours and hours.
I can send you the blog post actually, and then it's a bit laid down.
That would be really, really, really amazing. Yes, please. Yes, please. Ladies, anybody else? Anybody want to ask anything?
Yeah, I've got a quick question. So I haven't read your book, but I was having a bit of a flick through another book yesterday. It's the River Cottage book about weaning.
Okay.
And there's a doctor written a bit in that who says that the window from 4 months to 6 months is when children are least likely to be kind of scared of trying new things and having new flavors. And it recommends giving them little tastes of food from 4 months. So not properly feeding them foods, but giving them little tastes. Is that something that you've got any views on?
I don't. I mean, I'm not a doctor or a dietitian or anything, so I'm sort of would follow the NHS person. I think the issue is obviously this advice changes all the time. So whenever a book was written, it might change, and in 3 years' time, the advice might be different as well. I think you're not meant to give babies anything before they are 17 weeks old, because I think before that stage, the stomach really can't cope with it. But I would say if you're just giving small tastes, there's probably no medical reason why you wouldn't between 17 weeks and the 6 month mark. I think it's entirely up to you. For me, I was just a bit sort of like, I waited until closer to 6 months, mostly because I just couldn't face this extra level of admin, feeding and stuff. But yeah, I think it's like all these things, it's entirely personal, and you just got to do what works for you and your family. And I think a lot of this, when they're like, about taste and introducing it this window and stuff, I think it puts a lot of stress onto you to feel like you have to do something, and if they're fussy, it's because you didn't do this. But actually, I think most of the time, it doesn't really matter. And I don't know how you could ever measure that anyway. So, you know, if that's what you want to do, it would be the right thing. Equally, if it's not what you want to do, that would be the right thing too. Sorry, that was really not helpful.
No, it was. I think you're perfectly right. And also what I'm realizing is, having had my second baby, it depends on the baby, doesn't it? Some of them,
yeah,
they really want it, like, you know, they just want what you've got, and some of them are like,
yeah, some of them like, I'll try to put everything, and they're watching you eat, and like, so, and I know my younger two as well, because they could see the older ones eating, and it became this thing, they were sat up at the table. And actually, you know, I think I did start weaning a bit earlier with the younger one, but actually she didn't eat anything until she was closer to, like, nothing came out the other end. She was more just at the table, like smashing things about. So again, I think, you know, you could even start sort of earlier, and you might find that nothing goes in anyway. So actually it doesn't matter. It's all been this sort of sensory experience for them.
yeah, that's cool. Nice. Anybody else, ladies? To give everybody a moment, because we're all wrestling our babies, aren't we, and muting and unmuting at the same time. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. I think I can see Juliet typing. Maybe. No. It's all good. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Rachel? You tell us.
No, all I can say is, come and follow me on Instagram if you want to, and if you've got any extra questions that you think of, always open to having any DMs, so just feel free to drop me a line if there's something you want to ask later down the line, and hopefully I can help you there. And also, just again, this is my book, and that's my baby on the front. She's much bigger than that now. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions if you think of them sort of later.
That is brilliant. I have to say, I love this book, genuinely really love it. And it, as a foodie, someone who enjoys cooking, this is exciting. And I want to even eat this stuff as well as give it to my baby. So thank you for joining us, Rachel. Really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, it's been lovely. And I shall say goodbye to everybody. Yay! Oh, I need the surname. What is your surname, Rachel? Boyer or Boyette?
I'll type it in. There you go.
Perfect. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody.
Thank you. And good luck everyone with your pregnancies or like with your babies and stuff.
Oh, thanks, love.
Thank you.